Okay, so we're pretty close to the 7 period, and it's actually 7 o'clock by that time, so I guess I'm here. Okay, so this is my very first video on YouTube, and I'm just going to go over, obviously, the introduction of what I'm attempting to do, and it's not explicitly what people, I think, are perceiving I'm attempting to do. This is a process of communication. It's got nothing to do with proving or disproving any idea or any concept from anybody. I'm not here to, tell anybody they're wrong, tell anybody they should be thinking a certain way. That's not the purpose of this channel. This channel is basically just to initiate communication, which is the one reason why I'm doing this actually as a live video broadcast, because I actually want people to be involved. And I'm going to be doing this on a roughly 60-minute time frame, but if I don't get anybody to be involved, at least in the communication side of things, it may be a bit less than that, but we'll see how it goes. I apologize for looking to the side here because this is my agenda over here. Idea time. Actually, again, it's a communication channel. My purpose is to talk to people who represent themselves as experts in a topic, and my purpose was to actually talk to an expert. This first video is supposed to be on the flat Earth ideas, and I did try to get a flat Earth representative to join me in this chat, but I was not able to get anybody, so it's going to have to be basically me giving my opinion or my thinking and what I would like to try to initiate with respect to getting people to communicate in somewhat probably a maybe non-direct fashion, if nobody joins obviously during the chat period. Probably the thing that led me to this probably actually was videos I saw on YouTube about it, and people talking about it, basically on the debunking side. The Simon Dan channel, I actually look at a lot. I do like his channel. I find his way of expressing his comments to be clear and to be precise, and I have no issues with him, but I do know people from the flat Earth arena very much have a difficulty in, performing communication with him, probably in a fashion to express their concepts and ideas in a much more interactive fashion. And it was something that actually, when I saw it, led me to say, hey, I'd like to start a channel to start discussions, which is something that I was thinking of, but this actually pretty much triggered it. I think probably the one thing that tripped my mind first with respect to videos I saw that talked about the flat Earth topic led me to believe it was a somewhat conspiracy theory based, agenda. For myself, I'm definitely not a fan of conspiracy theories. I find them a way of trying to basically make some sort of, validation based on some sort of feeling of, trying to expose things that are hidden or expose, things that they feel are being, taken advantage of in general. And I understand that there are people who may have that perception and do things in life in that sort of fashion, but with respect to conspiracy theory, I never take into the aspect that it's a huge group of people doing this and that they're overwhelming everybody else around them because, of their ability to basically, shutter people's vision from seeing the truth. I just don't feel that that's a valid technique to use in basically trying to discuss a matter of perspective. For myself, with respect to the flat earth and any topic in general that I like to discuss with things that are somewhat questionable from my perspective is, what led people down the path of believing the topic that they're talking about or topic that they follow. And it really is my purpose is, at least in this context, is to really try to, get information that could give me a understanding of what led people down that path. What was it that brought someone's attention to the topic? What was it that made them, believe that this was a topic that had validity and that they felt it was something that they would be more acceptable in believing and taking on as something under their umbrella, I guess. History-wise, from what I read, at least with the aspect of the common line of thinking with respect to the flat Earth community, it was started by a gentleman called Samuel Rowbotham. He did some, investigations in the 1800s, and from what I've read, he was the one who developed the current model that people follow, which is the aspect of the Earth being a flat, plane-like configuration, with the North Pole being in the center of this plane, or what people call a circular plane, I guess, and the South Pole being at the outer edge of this circle area that is a ice sheet 150 feet high that they indicate is basically Antarctica. So that's something that apparently this person had started, and he was the one who pushed it forward. I don't know how seriously, he was taken at the time. I just read initial stuff on Wiki about him. I did see that he was not highly educated. His education probably, I guess, is from self-learning for the most part, but in general, he was not an academic. So, that leads me to believe, that maybe his beliefs were somewhat personal in nature, not so much, an aspect of investigation of questions that he had brought about that he needed answers to, and came up with his ideas and his theories. It looks like, at least in the United States, which actually leads me to basically the evolution that, I was wondering about because of certain topics in certain videos I saw. There was a group in the U.S., a Catholic group called the Christian Catholic Apostolic Church, which took up Mr. Robeson's ideas and basically promoted them. And it seems like they probably maybe were the first group that really pushed that idea through in a much more open fashion, and brought it about to probably the general public, I guess, for the most part. The one thing, though, that stands out to me is that it leads me to think that, this may be more of a religious, mindset, that, it's people thinking, I feel uncomfortable looking at things that go against my religious beliefs, and I need something to basically confirm my beliefs with respect to my religion and how my religion taught me to look at the world. And it looked like, again, this Christian Catholic Apostolic Church group used it for that purpose, is that they wanted to basically have some sort of a means of saying, here's some validity and, what we believe and what we think is the true nature of the evolution of our planet and how we sit in the universe. And again, it comes down from that central aspect that, it's very much, humans are the center of the universe. Everything revolves around them. And this whole concept of the flat earth seemed to fit into that mindset that, everything is built to basically help human beings, move forward as being the central point in the universe, I guess, for lack of a better word, itself. Probably the big thing is when I read that, and I did see on YouTube that there are people who specify that there are verses in the Christian Bible that indicate the flat Earth theory, I guess. And I actually wanted to go through that at the beginning. While I don't want to sit there and debunk or say this is not true or this is not false, it is actually something I wanted to go through and see if it has any points that I can, say, hey, can someone explain this to me? What does it mean? Does it seem like it fits into the general concept of the flat Earth mentality and how people think about it? So I'm going to do that at this first point. And what I'm going to do is go over to a web page called Bible Verses About Flat Earth. It's on obviously the internet, and I'll just put it in the chat because I don't know how you do screen capturing via the YouTube mechanism. So I'm actually capturing it myself via video capture. So I actually have this visible on my version of the video, but I'm assuming it's not being seen by the live stream. So these are the things that I want to go through it. I just want to ask questions about it because, again, the aspect of saying that these statements are related to flat Earth itself, and I'm going to assume people say that these statements are making confirmations about the historic nature of the Earth and the fact that it was represented in this sort of fashion for a very long period of time. So I'm just going to go through the list, and I'm going to point out the fact that, I think this or I think that about the statement, but I'll let other people, come to choosing how they want to perceive this, and maybe they can, state, what they feel is correct or incorrect. So the first one is Chronicles 16:30, and it says, "Tremble before him, all the earth. The world is firmly established; it cannot be moved." I actually don't understand why that would say it is a validity in the flat Earth topic itself. How does it validate that statement? I'm thinking people are saying that this whole concept of the scientific explanation of the Earth uses an aspect of moving through space. And I'm thinking people believe that the Bible is saying Earth can't be moved. And I'm not really sure if that can be, a explicit statement that say, hey, it can't be moved, so how can it be moving through space? I find this difficult to understand because, again, these things came from a period in time where people really weren't as knowledgeable, obviously, of the universe and how things, fit within the context of the universe and how things, would be represented in that sort of fashion. So I can't really say that they would actually understand the whole aspect that, hey, the Earth is moving through space, because I can't see them really understanding that concept at that period of time. So if anybody can maybe explain to me, what that means and how it does confirm flat Earth, that would be interesting to hear. The second one is Samuel 2:8. It states, he raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are Lord's on them, and he has set the world. Be honest, I really don't have any comment on that. To me, I absolutely don't understand what that phrase means in the context of flat Earth. So, if someone can give me an explanation of why that, is a confirmation of flat Earth, again, I'd like to know, what the reason is, because again, it doesn't. It actually is it's a very unclear statement to me. The next one is Isaiah 11:12. It states, he will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judea from the four quarters of the earth. I'm thinking this one, it goes in the concept of what people are perceiving, obviously what they mean by the four quarters of the earth. And there is actually a lot of aspect of talk about quarters of the earth and what that meant, especially from the biblical time. And I've heard different, comments on it about what that actually meant. And to me, my guess with respect to the flat Earth community, who obviously advocate to using the Bible as a validation point, was the aspect of saying, hey, it's the four corners, and technically a spherical, object doesn't have corners. So, why is this describing corners? Of course, the current flat Earth model describes it as a circular disc-like object, and to me, that doesn't have any quarters either, or quarters that can be perceived in that sort of fashion. So, again, it somewhat kind of like makes it unclear exactly what they're trying to validate this as being a proof based on biblical statements. So again, definitely if someone has any comments on what the explanation of that is, would be very interesting. The next one is Isaiah 40:22. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. My thinking of this one is I've heard the flat Earth community talk about the heavens as being basically this envelope, type of way of looking at it. Technically it would be the atmosphere, and they believe that it is encompassing the Earth in this sort of, let's say half spherical kind of construct. And my guess is that's what they're trying to say, is that the Bible is explicitly saying, that's your heaven, that's what it is. And it fits in line with the presentation of what the flat Earth community represents as the model of the flat Earth. But again, if I'm making a mistake, again, anybody who wants to validate and explain to me if I'm making a misinterpretation of it, that would be, again, great to hear. The next one is Job 26:7. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. To me, this is almost like a confirmation of the spherical model of the earth, because technically, the earth sitting in the universe, which most people would perceive as being nothing. So I'm kind of thinking to myself, how does this validate the flat Earth? It almost seems like it could be a validation point for both sides. So again, if someone can explain to me, why it explains the flat Earth and why it doesn't actually explain the spherical model, because to me, it really can, fit both models. The next one is Job 26:10. It states, he marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. Again, that's a difficult statement to, grasp how it would validate flat Earth. For myself personally, I don't see it. It almost seems like, people are trying, at least with this statement, trying to describe the aspect of the boundary between, day and light, which would be the boundary of obviously how the sun lines up on the Earth with respect to, where the day begins and where the nighttime ends. Well, obviously, it's not an absolute explicit marcation. It's more of a phasing kind of concept. But to me, this one almost can seem like it can validate. It actually seems like it validates more of the spherical model than it actually does the flat Earth model. So again, to me, it's confusing to see actually how flat Earth would use this as a validation point. Job 2824. It states, for he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. Okay, I'm not really sure what this is referring to explicitly with, let's say, in the biblical context. I don't see, it stating any kind of concept that could be applicable to the flat Earth model. Ends of the earth, I guess, the whole aspect of saying, hey, you get to the point and there's no more Earth. I'm not really sure if that's what the flat Earth takes of that. So again, if someone can maybe explain that to me, that would be great. The next one is Job 37:3. He unleashes his lightning beneath the whole heaven and sends it to the ends of the earth. Again, another confusing phrase. I'm really not sure. I'm not really sure exactly why this would, validate the concept of a flat Earth model. To me, it sounds like it's just describing lightning, and nothing more. The whole aspect of, obviously lightning coming from clouds in the sky to the earth, which is basically the movement of lightning. And how does that validate flat Earth? Again, I need some help on that one. Job 37:18. Can you join him in spreading out the skies hard as a mirror of cast bronze? That's an interesting phrase, and to be honest, I really don't know what it means. So I'll leave it at that. I really don't know what that statement means, and I can't even give a interpretation of exactly how that would fit into the flat Earth mentality or model. And the last one is Matthew verse 4:8. States, again, the devil took him into a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. Okay, I really don't understand, if that means the whole aspect, if you can see everything, then it must be flat. If that's the reasoning, someone's going to have to validate that. But I do actually still have a hard time understanding why that would represent a flat Earth. I'll leave it at that, I guess. And if anybody can maybe give explanation, that would be great. So that's the model, and pardon, I'm actually just minimizing screens. To me, why I wanted to go over that fact was because it somewhat seemed to be the basis of, I guess, maybe the initial perception of flat Earth and how people were trying to purport that it actually is a valid concept or statement. I'm not sure if the current community follows it as much, even though I did see a good amount of videos on people talking about the flat Earth topic, and again, using that as a aspect of why they purport to that idea of, obviously the Earth being a flat configuration. Um, it does lead me to say, well, maybe the driving force is, a very religious driving force. And again, just like my original statement is, maybe it's people who have a difficult problem dealing with statements that conflict from their perspective, their religious beliefs. And this topic fits in line with their religious belief, and that they appreciate it because it confirms, technically what they want to believe. Um, don't know, at least from the aspect of looking at it from a religious perspective, but that's actually very valid. But again, that's people's perspective, and if that's the way they want to look at things, they're perfectly within their rights to look at it that way. If it makes them feel more comfortable about how they see things, well, again, that's how it goes for them. My goal is really, again, to try and figure out, why do people believe what they believe? What led them down that path? And for the new group, I've talked to some people, and they go through explanations that are not religious in nature. They try to explain things in what they feel is a very scientific manner. And my interest in, let's say, that type of person is, what exactly led them to follow that kind of interpretation? And that's somewhat where I'm lost, because I haven't actually seen anybody describe that. I haven't seen a flat Earth person say, I was sitting and I was looking at information that was described in the current standard model, which is a spherical model, obviously, of the Earth, and I just couldn't see exactly how things fit in cleanly with that model. And it made me think, is there potentially another way of looking at that? I haven't really seen anybody say that that's what they've done, even though I've actually seen YouTube videos that look like they were somewhat using that aspect of trying to interpret the spherical model in a way that led them to, let's say, make these questions. But I don't know if it was something that led them to ask those questions, or if it was just something in the back of their mind saying, hey, I can't understand this. The model that we do have doesn't explain it to me in a way that makes it clear enough for me to, let's say, accept the statements that are being made by that. So that's really what interests me. Is he goes, how did people follow that path? How did they go down the road that they chose to go down? What made them feel that the current model was inefficient or inaccurate? And if someone could explain that to me, that would be great. I see nobody's actually signed into my live stream yet, so I don't have anybody really making explanations to me at this point in time. But as people watch this video, obviously on YouTube, definitely, that's the type of information I would love to hear. I would love to hear someone explain, there was something missing that I needed explanations for, and the current model just wasn't explaining it to me in a way that made me feel comfortable about the actual explanation that was being given. We're coming back to that in a few minutes. I just want to go over my notes so that way I can keep on track. Okay, I did talk about conspiracy theory, and I did see a lot of YouTube videos, again, talking about the flat Earth model, and was extremely conspiracy theory centric. And as I said before, to me, that is really just, there's no validity in that. just saying, something bothers me that I heard, and because of it, I can't believe what's being said. And I'm thinking to myself, well, is the conspiracy theory that you think that you're perceiving is the reason for your belief in what you believe in? Or is it you believe in what you believe in and you're looking for a reason to validate it, and conspiracy theory is a reason to validate? So to say, this is what I believe is right, and I'm looking over here and they're saying this has got to be a conspiracy because it doesn't jive with what I'm thinking. And again, I don't believe in that kind of concept. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Again, I'm just going over my notes. Yeah, I actually just watched the Behind the Curve documentary on Netflix, which actually talked about the flat Earth community, and we basically just talked to people, basically people who were in the forefront of the community, and basically had general conversations with them. Didn't go into too much of the extreme of describing or talking about the concept, and basically starting up basically a conversation of basically validation of the topics on both sides. We have the spherical side and we have the flat Earth side, and the best way to have a kind of communication with this is basically have people sitting down who are followers of obviously each side, and basically have a conversation. It doesn't have to be violent. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It just has to say, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. And then come up with the aspect of explaining why you believe it. I'm not going to get in the aspect that people should try to prove it, because to me, I believe very much in a scientific method, and the scientific method has an aspect of validation. I don't care how much proof you give me, you've got to prove to me that it's valid. And that process actually comes from peer review. That's the whole process. That's technically the end methodology that's part of the scientific method itself, is the aspect of saying, hey, this is conclusions I made. You present your information, you present your strategies, your theory, you present everything you did on it, and you give it to basically your peers. Technically, that's the only people who can really evaluate you are your peers. And they have to come up and they have to say, I validated and your theories and that are correct. But on top of that, you're going to have to accept the fact that other people are going to go through that process too. And the scientific method really is everybody has to agree with the concept of the theory. They can't just be, hey, a couple of people here, we said we believe this, and nobody else believes it. Say I can't validate it, so how can I conform to your beliefs? And the scientific method is all about that, and it's got nothing to do with saying, hey, I looked at things my way and you looked at things your way, and my looking doesn't jive up what you're looking. The methodology actually goes through the process of stipulating how the observations are done, how the calculations are achieved, how the tests are being done. And it's just not that you did a test, you did an observation. It's the fact that you have to give, the information that describes how you did that. Because not only does the conclusion have to be validated, but the methodology of how you achieve your conclusions also has to be validated. Again, that's the scientific method. And there's no scientist on this planet that will ever get confirmation from any other scientist in their domain unless they can prove to them that their methodology is sound and their conclusions are sound. And once they do that, once they give the information that allows for those conclusions to be made, then you got confirmation of agreement. And that's, again, not something I want a conversation about, because that's actually a very big thing to do. It's not something you just sit down and you talk about. It's actually a whole process you've got to go through. Obviously, you present your observations in some sort of official manner, but that doesn't have to happen technically at a conversation, or at least in a way that you're just talking to people about your ideas. I was talking to a flat Earth representative, and not so much asking him questions about the topic itself, but really continually asking, what led him down the path, and he, he explained to me that it was information he was hearing that led him to question. I think it was information he was hearing with respect to the flat Earth community, and he felt that the statements being made were, from his perspective, valid, and because of that validity, it led him down the path of following the flat Earth, the flat Earth model. He did, though, say that it also basically helped him validate his religious feelings, and that he felt that things lined up, which somewhat sort of like, based on my original statement that, people were looking for religious reasoning, or looking for reasoning to validate their religious beliefs. I think this was almost in that same sort of light, saying, oh, hey, I have this information, it's describing something that lines up to something that more closely, jives with my feelings from a religious perspective. And, I would say in the end, makes them feel more comfortable. And because of it, these things, kind of like, made the person feel, that there is a validity that he was willing to accept as proof. Again, I'm not going to go into saying this is wrong, that's right, this proof is wrong, that proof is right. It's really not the reasoning for my channel. My channel is basically just to start a conversation. I really want people to ask questions, and I really want people to be willing to listen to questions, because questions are the things that make people think about what they believe in, what they're talking about, what they're representing, in a way that may not completely jive with how they do things. And because of it, it may give them a way to maybe explain themselves a bit differently, that people can sit there and say, hey, I can see where you're coming from. I may not agree with you, but I can see where you're coming from. And I think that's a helpful point, is, helping people see other people's points of view, not to be an argumentative, fashion, but just basically say, hey, this is the way I look at things, and I believe in what I look at. This is what I believe is correct, and, I'll accept the fact that you may not believe it. And, that's perfectly your choice. And I think if you can have communication like that, it would be extremely helpful. And I would definitely like to see, like on YouTube, where I see people having conversations about the argumentative aspects of the two models, for them to sit down and, something like a live chat, I think would be great. YouTube put this, system together, obviously, for people to have this capability of chatting in a very, real-time manner. So to say, hey, we can sit down, I can say something. What do you think? And that person comes say, hey, I just don't think it that way. I think this way. And then they can start the communication. They can start the process. They may not agree, but at least they can converse. They can talk about it. And I'm hoping that maybe this video can initiate that, and it can start people just asking questions. Because to me, I think that's one of the most important things in life, is the ability to ask questions. I do have a person on my chat, finally a person who joined the topic. And again, The person is village idiot. Control. I guess that's his full acronym. He doesn't believe it, and it's his perfect right. He doesn't believe it. And I do want people on the flat earth side of the topic to sit there and say, he doesn't believe me. That's his perfect right not to believe me. He may be offensive, he may say stuff that I don't like. But we do live in a free world, at least we'll say the Western world, to use kind of like, expression of exactly how people say, hey, the people who are free, the people who are not free. Usually it's the Western world that's free, even though it's not really valid itself. But I'm really talking the aspect of saying people are allowed to say what they want to say. There's no problem with that. People are allowed to say what they want to say. And you obviously have the ability to disagree with them. Perfectly, everybody's right to disagree with somebody. But especially in the United States, the whole aspect of their constitution, they express explicitly in their constitution, as a criteria that people are allowed to express what they want to express. Free speech. People are allowed to say what they want to say. And, people are allowed to disagree. That's the whole aspect. And, if you have a disagreement with somebody, you can express it to them, say, hey, I don't agree with you. And the good thing about that is that starts the conversation. Says, hey, this is what I think. This is what I believe. They may be very aggressive about it and say, guys, hey, you may not understand this. I've had actually flat earth people talk to me and say, you're an idiot if you don't believe this. And of course, that's very offensive to me. I'm saying, why am I an idiot if I don't believe something? There's all kinds of things I don't believe. Does that mean everything I don't believe in, I must be an idiot because of it? I would like to say I would disagree with that. I'd like to say, hey, it's my right to disagree. And the fact is, I'm hoping that the person on the other side goes, hey, yeah, you have the right to disagree. It's perfectly within your, freedom of liberty to say that you don't agree with what I believe in. Let's talk, which is what my whole channel is all about, is to say, hey, we may disagree, but why don't we talk? Why don't you explain to me what it is that you're trying to express as a belief that you have, and express it to me in a way that I can sit there and say, hey, I can see where you're coming from. And I said multiple times here, you may not agree with them, even if you actually understand them. And to me, that actually is an interesting point. It's not so much, going through the process of agreeing with somebody, but going through the process of understanding where they came from, why they believe in what they believe. The flat earth stuff, as I went through, and while I obviously didn't do an extensive amount of research on it, the parts that I did do, it did lead me to believe that, hey, this seems like this may be a religious, process or path. Is it? I don't really know. I've actually had people say, no, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got to do with their belief and, looking at the earth in a different light that other people look at it. That's perfectly fine, perfectly fine. We just need the validity because, again, if you tell me something, first thing we're going to ask for is validity. And if you say, well, this statement here says this, and this, observation here states that, and again, just like I talked about with respect to the scientific method, I'm going to say, okay, has it been proven? And it's got to be proven across the board. It can't be proven by let's say, the people who mandate it. It's got to be something taken by the people who don't believe it. It's to say, I don't believe this. This is what you did, and I can't validate it. The flat earth community, you can do the same thing on your side. You can sit there and say, hey, you guys say this. I can't validate it. And the whole process is for each side to sit there and go, okay, this is what I did. This is what it's based on. And it's got to be the aspect of things when we look at it, it goes, yeah, I agree on how you did this, so I can see exactly why you would go that way. Or it could be, I don't agree with that at all. Like the flat Earth community, they don't believe in the concept of gravity, at least gravity in the aspect of, the way it's described in the normal perspective of physics and the sciences. They don't believe in it. So if a person from the spherical side comes to there and says, hey, I'm following this methodology, yada, 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 and of course the methodology goes through the process of using, let's say, gravity as part of their criteria for validation, the flat Earth side says, it goes, yeah, but that's from their perspective, that's not true. You haven't proven. I've heard them say that. Goes, you haven't proven that gravity exists. And again, while I'm not officially a scientist, my background is very is heavy. I've got a fairly good background education-wise, so I understand these things and I understand where they come from. And I understand if someone doesn't understand a topic, it really is my responsibility, if I'm the one purporting it, to really explain it in a way that they can understand it, which is a difficult thing to do. Now, there's lots of things in the natural world and how science explains it that's hard to wrap your mind around. Take a look at quantum mechanics. If you want to talk about an extremely complex topic that's extremely difficult to wrap your mind around, talk about that. Go see what people say about that. And all these concepts technically are not explicitly proven, but in there say, hey, I can see this and I can see that. And this came from that because you can see those two things explicitly, physically, if you want to give it some sort of, physical kind of representation. In the scientific community, there's lots of things that don't have that kind of capability. It's really kind of like observations are made and interpretations are generated. And basically, we'll say formulation, calculations, whatever way you want to describe that, are created. I don't want to use created because it makes it sound like it came from the back of someone's, thinking and, imagination. And that's not what it is. Kind of like saying, I've got these observations, and from these observations, I went through the process of developing these formula that describe these observations. Technically, that's what science is really about. The whole aspect of saying, can you describe it somewhat in a mathematical formulation? Because in the end, that's how a lot of validation goes through the process. And it goes, do you have some sort of formula that describes to me what you're seeing? And that formula actually has concrete methodology behind it. And someone says, yes, I can see how you got that there. I don't know why things are dragged to the bottom of the ground, but I have an explanation that describes that, and it's really the job of people to try to explain it in such a way that the other side at least has the ability to start to see it potentially from that perspective. May not agree with it, but at least they can start to see it. They can see why that person sees it, not so much that they see it, because if you disagree with something, you disagree with it. It's not going to be it's going to be something that is explicitly described in a way that can be perceived in a very, very, in a way that someone can sit there and look and say, I can see that. And again, science starts from the perspective of observation, but observation can mean many different things. There's a lot of different sciences that the observations that they're making are not something that's very visual. It's something that's, got some sort of other means to making a observational interpretation behind it. But if people can sit down and say, this is what I'm thinking, this is the way I look at stuff, this is the way I believe things work. And then the other person could sit there and, again, like I said, through this whole process and this whole topic, this last part that I said, they say, hey, good, you described to me what you believe. Now I really want to see exactly how it is that I can go about, validating for myself. I don't want to sit there and say, hey, you're absolutely wrong. What I want to say is, I went through your mechanism, and this is what I concluded. And, I may disagree with the person's perspective. But again, that's part of life. No two people are going to see the same thing the same way. That's just part of life. That's the way people look at things. It's the way people work. It's the way people think. Just the aspect of sitting down and going, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I babbled here now for 20 minutes on this last topic, which is basically just the process of actually how am I going to get the information that I want? And it really gets down to the aspect of, having someone explain to me how did they go down the path that led them to following the flat earth, concept, methodology, topic, whatever phrase you want to use to describe that thing. That's what I want to know. I don't believe in it. I don't want people to say I'm a person here trying to dispute and no. And I'm trying to put a facade in front of my channel to make it look like that's not what I'm doing. And just like everybody, who you'll talk to, they may agree or disagree with you, and I just don't. I just don't. But it's not the fact that I disagree with the flat Earth that interests me. In fact, the aspect of the concept of flat Earth does not interest me. It may be things that other people sit there and stand out for, especially people who argumentatively communicate with other people about it. My goal is not to sit there and say, hey, flat Earth person, you're absolutely wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a fool. I'm not going to do that. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to tell somebody that they're wrong. I want to actually ask questions because I don't agree with you. But damn, I'm really interested to find out exactly how you actually got to where you got to. Why do you believe in that topic? For me, like I said, I think the religious, the religious explanation that I could at least interpret seems like one of the reasons that I could see, especially obviously in the 1800s and stuff like that, where obviously large part of the population was not, highly educated, as opposed to nowadays, people are more educated. They have the ability to actually question things in a much more concrete fashion, and so to say, hey, if you have people who have that capability today, how are they coming to the conclusions that they're coming to? To me, that's the stuff that I want to hear. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to hear flat earth people explain. I know they believe what they believe, and that's good for them. They're completely allowed to believe what they want to believe. But damn, wouldn't it be interesting to find out exactly why or how they went down that path? To me, it is. And that's what I'm hoping to find out about. I just had somebody, Globe Strike Back, make a statement. I say educated in the aspect that generally the mandate is at least you go to grade 10 in education, as opposed in the 1800s. That probably was something you didn't see as often as you do nowadays. And that's sort of what I'm saying. You've got more education behind you, so like you can probably make statements or comments that may be a bit more valid than they would have been able to make in the past, at least from an educational point of view. The fact that they may not have a high level of education, that's completely valid. But the whole aspect is I still believe that people are more educated in a general sense than they are today than they were 150 years ago. Well, actually, Globe Strike Back, your last statement there. Actually, I was watching a video with Neil deGrasse Tyson, he said the same thing. He said social media actually has a lot of impact, and it's not so much the fact that it's causing it, as much as it allows people to express obviously their opinions in a very open fashion. And obviously, we're talking the internet here, so you have the ability, to contact or at least expose yourself to a huge amount of people. Obviously, you never had this before the internet. You didn't have this capability. The general person didn't have this capability. The only kind of people who had this kind of, ability to communicate was obviously people who were in the forefront of the society in that. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, but the question is not so much that the people accept evidence as much as how do they come to the evidence that they're suggesting. To me, again, the Globe Strike Back, that to me, it's really interesting. I know. Can you explain that? Can you sit there and say, I believe people think this way because, let's say, maybe they had a really hard life, maybe their parents were very hard on them, and they looked at things in a different point of view just because their parents were extremely tough or hard on them, and maybe it led them down that path. Those are the types of things I want to know. It goes, hey, you started here, how did you get here? And I know there's a lot of things that they're saying, well, yeah, but they're saying there's lots of evidence, there's lots of explanations. And I'm really not really looking for, again, the facts of the theory that people are putting out, especially with this particular topic. I'm looking at how did they go down the road that led them to believe those facts? Was it just something intrinsic inside them? So they say, hey, this makes sense to me. I'm looking over here at the spherical model. That doesn't make sense to me. This one does make sense to me. Is that the method that they followed? Is that the reason why they chose that? I know Neil deGrasse Tyson, he did make a statement that he did feel people are not as educated as much as he feels people should be educated, because obviously people potentially could be making assumptions about what they're seeing, and I think that's completely valid. People see things and they make conclusions on what they see. It's a standard practice, and you see people do that. I've seen experiments people have done on YouTube explaining their flat Earth theories, I guess. And you look at it and they're saying, yeah, but that almost makes it sound like you actually don't understand the thing that you're, basically purporting as being incorrect. And he says, why don't you understand that? What was it that made you come to the conclusion that what was there was incorrect? I want to know that information. He goes, how did you make that conclusion? Self-esteem, I think that's another valid point. I don't know if that's everybody, because now they're talking that it's in the thousands of people who follow this topic, and I'm thinking, are we talking just a bunch of people who are caught up on themselves who are following this? I don't know, and I think that's too much of a general statement to make. That say, hey, everybody's like this. I'm sure everybody has their different reasons. It'd be great to find out what those reasons are. Well, that's I've seen people talk about the aspect of those secret organizations and exactly how they're controlling the world, and maybe this whole aspect of saying, hey, we're doing our own thing and we're making conclusions and it's our own society and da. To me, that goes along the lines of conspiracy theory. At least conspiracy theory seems to come up a lot from these groups who are enclosed, and somewhat, looking at the world from a very, narrow point of view. And I just don't follow it. I said that in the initial parts of my my YouTube chat at this point in time. Yeah, those are you're making all valid points. Doesn't explain to me though why they actually think the way they think. You know, I'm actually looking for I'm looking for the psychological. You need a psychologist really to explain some of these things potentially. Let's from a scientific point of view, and maybe a psychologist is the right person to ask the questions. Not my area of expertise. I can only ask questions that are in the back of my mind and saying, hey, this is the way I want to find out things. This is the information I'd like to know. And I do know it's more along the lines of the psychological interpretation of it. And there actually were some psychologists on the video I saw, the Behind the Curve video I saw, and there were some psychologists on there talking about the things you just mentioned about, people wanting to be this, wanting to be that, look at and all the things. My feeling when I saw that part is, it would have been great if they would have sat down and says, hey, we're going to run some experiments here. We really want to know exactly how this thinking has evolved. Is it a religious thinking? Because this seemed like initially this was an extremely, religious, evolution, even though Mr. I forget his name. Where's my mouse? Talk about channel. Samuel Robertson. He started this topic really in the context of how people are looking at it. Like when you read the wiki page about, his theory, I guess. He basically is describing what the YouTube people are describing now, this exact same type of thing. I'm putting on top of it, the whole aspect. They said the next thing that happened that would seem to be a major evolution was the aspect that a Christian group, caught onto it. And my feeling was that, again, they were looking for validation of things that they believed in, that at the time, because 1800s, there was a big evolution of the scientific community at that point in time, and I'm sure a lot of people who were obviously on the, let's say, non-academic side of things, which was a huge part of the population, they probably felt extremely uncomfortable. So they said, these scientists are saying all this stuff, but this doesn't line up with what I believe, and they see this guy who talks about something, so he goes, oh, here's somebody who's expressing something in quotation marks, a scientific way. Like I said, they say, okay, we can say, yeah, we say that these things have some level of validity, but in this context, we can see that, things work this way because of this, and it still lines up with our beliefs. I'm kind of wondering, is that really the mantra of the way people in this community look at it? So it goes, hey, I have beliefs, and I don't have a way to look at the way things are explained to me that really allows me to feel comfortable with my beliefs in the general context of how, let's say, life is being expressed or exposed. And I have seen current YouTube videos. I say current YouTube. I have seen YouTube videos from current, obviously, flat Earth followers who do use that. And you look at it and you say, okay, it looks like they are using religious validation, for their reasoning for following the topic. Yeah, I heard them talk about the conspiracy theory one, and for me, at least on the video that I watched on TV, they just went in the aspect of saying, "Oh, this is a typical kind of type of thing you see with conspiracy theories." They didn't get in the aspect of saying this is the type of conspiracy theory, then this is exactly what they basically said this is something you see in conspiracy theories. But it would have been nice if they would have went, at least in the video on the program and the documentary, a bit more in detail. But again, the documentary wasn't so much, let's say, a documentary as much as just an exposure to this, let's say, group of people or this topic. It's growing, and to me, that's interesting thing is I don't know why it's growing. I would say that this seems like this should be something that maybe 10, 20 people would follow, but the fact that it may be growing, I actually go back to thinking to the statement that Neil deGrasse Tyson made, which is, are people really as educated as they should be? Because it seems like he goes, if you were more educated, would you come to these conclusions? There's a group called the Globebusters group, and I left a comment on a video I saw from them, and the first statement they made is, well, this is scientists and engineers who follow flat Earth and who are making valid conclusions based on scientific experimentation on the validity of flat Earth. And the thing that caught me was scientists and engineers. I'm sorry, I'm an engineer, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know any engineer that I could believe would follow this topic. I just can't see them believing in it. Basically, it would go against everything that they learned. It says, if it goes against everything you learned, then why learn it? It seems to be contradictory, and things that you basically go in as basically something that you follow in your life. You're an engineer, you're a scientist. Why would you turn around and do something that seems to be contradictory in what you do? Maybe I'm wrong. Many flat Earth people sit there say, yeah, but they're just looking at it from a different perspective. They're looking at it from a different way of looking at the criterion. I did state though that I can't see a group of scientists and engineers doing this. I can't see. And if someone could show me a scientist and engineer, I don't know. There's another topic that I saw on YouTube, which is not in the flat Earth line, but it was in this aspect of people making statements that goes against the standard norm of thinking, which had to do with the Big Bang Theory. And there was a call in quotation marks professor or professor that's being described. He was from Romania back in, I think, in the 50s, and that he did his experimentation that he proved the Big Bang was not a theory, that it didn't evolve, it didn't occur. And I'm thinking, God, every single physicist that I've ever heard talk about it, not a single one of them said there's any kind of question mark about the feeling of validity behind that thing. And it comes down to that aspect. You talk about any physicists, it goes, they know that the universe is expanding, that things are moving away from each other. They say if they're moving away from each other, at one point they must have came from someplace. At one point they came from a single point. And I'm trying to say, well, what was that single point? And this is to say, the way they explain this, it can only come from this kind of a very, explosive, kind of event. And I see people sit there say that. And I had a conversation with one person about the aspects. He goes, I can't believe what this person is saying. At least, he's not alive anymore. But people are following his statements. I think it was on YouTube or Netflix, something about him, and people just jumped on it. I'm thinking, boy, if you were a bit more educated, would you have done that? Would you have jumped on the bandwagon? I don't know. Sorry, I'm actually looking at my video, obviously, and you're typing away. Yeah, okay. Anyways, guys, I do want to thank the people who joined because, again, the purpose of this video was actually for communication. My channel is not about me sitting here and spewing out a bunch of thoughts. I don't really care to express the way I'm thinking, the way I look at things to other people. I'm not that kind of person. My purpose in life is not to really convince people to see things the way that I want them to see it. What I'm concerned about is, hey, I see you talking about something. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I say those things to physicists when I ask about quantum physics. If anybody wants to see strange science, go to quantum physics. I said, these guys, God, the stuff, it blows my mind. I can't wrap my mind around the things that they follow. It blows my mind. You know, you know. To some extent, I know the history of quantum physics. With Bohr and all them who initiated this concept. And you sit there and say to yourself, God, how did they come up with this idea? It'd be great to sit and think. It almost seems like it's something that came to them in some sort of light. I'm not talking about light from obviously the sky type. I mean, it's basically something that tripped inside their mind because all they're thinking of is what is this? What? I can understand that kind of evolution because that kind of methodology is just people asking questions, which is basically my purpose that I'm trying to achieve with this channel is ask questions. Ask questions and see if you get the answers that can maybe explain things to you in a way that makes you feel more understandable about what you're hearing. You may not agree with it, but at least you understand it. The religious stuff, that I actually understand. If that was the only explanation, I'd say I completely understand. Because I've known extremely religious people. I could see how that fits in line with the way they think. Don't agree with them, but at least I understand where they're coming from. And to me, I think that's a good thing. Yeah. Yes. Anyways, my hour's up. I've actually went past it. I've talked longer than I was expecting to talk, which is good. So maybe this might be a good endeavor for me. This is my first video, and I'm hoping it's going to catch the attention of people. My next video is actually going to be on Trump. And I'm hoping to get actually somebody from the Trump, I don't want to call them the arena, but, people follow the Trump, follow Trump, I guess, for lack of better description. But that to me is interesting. And, as I tell people, it's not interesting to me that Trump won the election. It's interesting to me why people believed that he was, and I'll put in quotation marks, the right person. I'm not from the States, so I don't know the whole political arena with there. I do know a lot of people say, hey, he didn't win the general election. He didn't win the number of votes. Because of the electoral system that they have in the States. It's somewhat, a little bit skewed a bit with respect to actually how the president of the United States is elected. But as I tell people, there still is a very large number of people who do, technically follow him. And that's going to be my next topic and my next conversation. I'm hoping I can get somebody, who can really be an advocate of that community so I can sit there and they can have a chat. And not my concern the fact that he won the election. My concern is, hey, can you explain to me exactly what it was that, led you to become a follower? And I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to thank everybody for listening.